All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our basically our third installment of this year's Father Charles Brandt Memorial Lecture, which has been a venerable 2-year tradition now for the Brandt Oyster River Hermitage Society. I will post some links in the chat when we get going. So if you're new to Father Charles Brandt, you can go to our website. You can see what we have going on. I'll also post a link to the YouTube channel where you can access the previous two webinars on this year's theme, which is Hermitage as Spiritual Practice. So the year before, we had a very interesting talk with Jonathan, what's his last name? Jonathan, uh,
Ellerby.
what?
Ellerby.
Ellerby. Jonathan Ellerby was last year, which is also on YouTube. And our first talk in this year's series, we had Father Cyprian Consiglio and uh, what was his name? I'm forgetting. He's a monk, a Kamadalese monk from India. And then we had the founder of Rivendell Hermitage. So we have really great conversation with Kathy Bentall. And today we have two and a half speakers. Well, let's call it three speakers. They're going to tell us about a sister hermitage project. So let me very quickly introduce to you Daniel F. Baker, Susan Tollefson, and Madison Cook. Okay, so Daniel Baker has a background in philosophy, and he lived alone for 2 years in a remote valley cabin in California's southern Sierra Nevada. After retiring from business, he moved to a rural community in the San Pedro River Valley of southeastern Arizona. There, he became one of the founders and the initial facilitator of the Hermitage program in what is now the Cascabel Conservation Association, of which he is an Emeritus Director. And he also worked as a conservation activist therein for over 3 decades. Daniel will be joining us remotely through a shared video, but Susan Tollefson, who's here with us, has for the past 9 years been living in a small earthen hermitage in the Hot Springs Canyon area of Cascabel, which is, as you know, a rural community in Arizona. Until recently, she co-chaired the Cascabel Conservation Association's Hermitage program, accompanying sojourners on solitary retreats in the wildlands that they steward. She currently co-chairs the Hermitage program from afar, and her desire is to return very soon to Cascabel for yearly accompaniment. And last but not least, Madison Cook has been the accompaniment person for the Hermitage since October of 2025. Her position also entails the collection of reflections kept by those who visit, which have been thoughtfully collected since the inception of the program in the 1980s. So it's a long-standing program. She's native to Arizona. And just very quickly before we jump in, I have personally been to the Hermitage at Cascabel, and Susan accompanied me there to the residence, and it's a very beautiful location, very beautiful program. They do amazing conservation work, and Jim Corbett, one of the founders, is a fascinating character. I'll link to his book as well. But other than that, we'll have some time between Susan and Madison and a short video from Daniel, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. All right, so over to you, Susan and Madison.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you, Jason, for the invitation. My name is Susan Tellefson, and I served as Jason said, as co-chair of the Hermitage program for 9 years, 2017 till most recently the beginning of this year. So what we thought we would do is that we would begin this the way we begin our Hermitage meetings, which is with a moment of silence to ground us. Maddie will keep time there. And after the moment of silence, Madison will introduce herself and she will read just two sojourner reflections. We refer to retreatants as sojourners when they come to stay with us. And after that, I'll share a very brief piece on the history of the Hermitage program and introduce Daniel Baker. And he will share his reflection on the topic, Hermitage as spiritual practice. And after that, I'll fill in the history from my time and just try to share a bit on the topic of Hermitage as spiritual practice. We'll end with Maddie reading a reflection, and then she'll open it up for questions. So I hope that'll be okay. So Maddie, you want to go ahead?
Okay, everyone. Hello. My name is Madison Cook, like Susan said, and I've been a part of the Hermitage program in Cascabel since October as the accompaniment person. So I've been helping take people down to our retreat centers and just accompanying them on their time there. And it's been really great. And yeah, one of the things that we do ask every time that we take somebody down and bring them back up is just to write a brief reflection on their time. So it can be on anything that inspired them during their time. And so what we've collected now is just a brief few reflections from the many, many years that we have. But I will just read off a couple of those, which is how we usually start all of our Conservation Association meetings, as just sort of a way to kind of bring the space and the thoughts of the people in the space into the meeting. So the first one I have is actually just from a construction worker. So we have the occupations and of the like they so it would be in the spring season. But they wrote this. They said, to articulate the meeting of the unknown with the of the known with the unknown is no small endeavor. And even using those words places the experience in quantifiable terms, which it is not. But I will do what I can. The wind and rain that followed me here not only seemed to parallel my experience, but almost mirror it. The undulations of calm and strong wind, covered light and uncovered light, warmth and cool. The brilliant moon seemed a companion at times, and I wondered if I was not unlike the moon, something distant and remote from the light, a servant more by reflection. When the calm came, revealing silence or the small, sweet desert sounds hidden there, I too would know an inner calm, or at the very least be commanded by it if agitation still prowled through my innards, and I could find refuge there. When I first settled in, I discovered exhaustion, and I knew that I sought rest. Yet, after seeking by the familiar and conventional means, I was still weary, and that left me wondering on the nature of rest, the nature of weariness. What I discovered was neither new nor profound, but it did become personal to me and so felt that way. There seems to be in me a lot to let go of, to move through or allow to change. Yet the act of letting go, pursued directly, ends up a deeply knotted tangle. The wisdom of others and my own experience suggests that keeping present, whether it be to an inward calm, the movement of the breath, the hope of a dream fulfilled will, by the nature of its purpose and steadfastness, result in a letting go of all that would be superfluous to that end. Thus, I am left more unencumbered, less burdened, more rested by consequence than by design, and that perhaps by a more consistent vigil in this direction, weariness might not assail me so tenaciously, and rest could be a place I live, not visit. I will only know by pursuit, it seems. And so the end of this sojourn is the threshold of that pursuit. Okay, and then our next one, we have one more, is from December of 2008, so that was the winter time, and it was written by Habitat for Humanity Director, and they say, I've told people that coming out to this desert hermitage is like entering into a little death. I'm stripped down, emptied out, my veneer worn away to expose torn tissue, raw heart, bare bone. The essential, the elemental, normally hidden and overlooked, reveals itself again in this place, this solitude, this silence.
Okay, thank you, Maddie. So a brief history of the Cascabel, what is now the Cascabel Conservation Association, is that our birth began around 1995. And at that time, it's a very sparsely populated, continues to be a sparsely populated area. And there was an environmental threat. A militia group was wanting to build a firing range down in the lower Hot Springs Canyon of where our hermitages are now. And so at that time, Jim and Pat Corbett, he wrote Goat Walking and Sanctuary for All Life. Some of you may be familiar with it. And others in the area, they secured funds to actually buy those acres. And the donations needed to be tax exempt. So that began the formation of a nonprofit. And at that time in 1995, it was called the Cascabel Hermitage Association. And so Jim and Pat and many others saw Hermitage as a low impact use of the land, and promoted the idea that that Hermitages people having time there would, especially activists at the time, would refresh them and renew them in their purpose. But at the same time, it would allow active work toward land conservation. So Daniel Baker became the primary, he calls it the administrator of the program, and he lived down in Hot Springs Canyon. So in his, let's call it his Hermitage camp, Daniel's camp, and he invited people to stay. So in 2012, moving forward, Daniel's health issues required that he pare down his work with the Hermitage program. So he sold his 160 acres where his Hermitage camp was to the Cascabel Hermitage Association, along with the funds to construct a hermitage. And the Cascabel Hermitage Association was growing and it needed to encompass more. So the name changed. It changed names from the Cascabel Hermitage Program to the Cascabel Conservation Association. So Daniel continued to serve the Hermitage Program until 2017, which is when I stepped in. So that's a little intro and background so that what Daniel will be sharing with you might give you some context. So Jason, you can play the video if you want.
Okay, I'm going to share the video, but if folks can't hear it, please let me know. All right, you can see it, I think, and just let me know if you can hear it. It starts with some water.
I don't hear it. You could, I think you have to share your sound as well.
Can you not hear it? Okay. Well, why would that be? How about I open the link instead?
I think there's a checkbox when you go to share your screen where you can also share your sound as well, like at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Great. Didn't know you had to do that. All right, let's try again. Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, thanks. Thanks for that, Maddie.
Hello, Daniel Baker here.
Some people can't see the video, but can everyone see the video? No one can see the video. Why would? Okay. All right, here we go. Yeah. Let's just check this. Do this one more time. I think we got it now, folks. Video and audio, okay?
Hello, Daniel Baker here, recording my thoughts on Hermitage as a spiritual practice. I have such a long and varied history with Hermitage, and it is so central to the story of my life that it's difficult to abstract from it to what is more than merely personal. However, as I have grown to have less affinity for abstraction, I'll try to hew close to the unhewn wood of my life without being too inappropriate, and hopefully find some points that may be of interest to others. Eremitism. The first thing I should say is that the hermitage of which I speak is the eremitic sort, as distinguished from Cenobitic monasticism, or for that matter, the Japanese hikikomori shut-ins who barely leave their room for years. The term eremitism is of Christian derivation, its Greek etymology often translated as desert, but I think better as wildlands, denoting a natural habitat lacking other human presence. It takes much of its meaning by association with early Christian mystics and ascetics, the desert fathers and mothers, but more generically intends going out alone into wildlands for religious purposes. A retreatant, when as a child I huddled in the arms of bushes and vines for solace in my suburban California backyard. Or boyhood summers spent in the piney woods and snaky backwaters of my grandparents' northern Louisiana farm. Or in college days when running for miles on the lonely trails of the San Ynez Mountains. Such solace and refreshment as I found there, I likewise observed in nearly all the 360 retreatants whose sojourns of a few days or weeks I had the privilege to facilitate for the Cascabel Hermitage program. Hermitage. My first truly eremitic hermitage was a cabin in a remote valley of the southern Sierra Nevada, where I lived for 2 years with only a bicycle to transport me over the 18 miles of mountain roads to the nearest town. The second was my camp in Hot Springs Canyon, which served as the resource center for the Cascabel Hermitage program, while I served as its administrator. Lastly, I solitarily now reside in a small straw bale home in North Cascabel, where I am surrounded by the wildlands of the middle San Pedro River Valley. These have been and remain the venue of a more profound eremitic experience. Healing. Hermitage for me has largely been about healing. Being a social species, going off alone is not entirely natural for humans. However, I felt rejected and driven out from my birth family and was quite wounded by that. I voluntarily engaged in a good deal of therapy in my early years, which was modestly helpful. But solitude in nature turned out to be a place where I could heal and feel acceptance by another, more elemental family, the earth, the universe, the divine, or whatever one chooses to call it. connection. One of the seminal rationales for creating the Cascabel Hermitage program was to allow retreatants the opportunity to feel that living connection to nature. Jim Corbett, in his posthumously published book, Sanctuary for All Life, began by opining that modern humans are mostly autistic, defined as the isolated self, saying, when meeting nature, we can't see that anyone is there. That awakening came to me at my hermitage in the Sierra Nevada. While simply washing my clothes in a tub outside the cabin, I was suddenly physically shaken into tears by what I can only describe, in C.S. Lewis's terms, as being surprised by joy. It was not, however, the heavens opening up to reveal a divinity beyond time and space, but rather the angels coming down to earth. The mountain behind the cabin, the twin pines out front, the moonflowers, shindaggers, suddenly everything alive, a presence in a hylozoistic nature. I don't really feel alone or isolated when in nature. Visions. Hermitage was equally about visioning. There's something about going inward in solitude that changes my lens and outward view of the world. It seems to continually become wider and more encompassing as I go deeper into myself and my relationships to others and the world. Hermitage in wildlands helps get me out of my head and all those cultural bounds that prescribe my vision. Process. Hermitage is not a one-time thing, and I am not an advocate of it as a continuous and permanent way of life, except for those peculiarly drawn to it. A month is about as long as I have ever been in exclusive solitude in nature, but more often it's some days. Nonetheless, upon return, it seems that the inner adventure quickly picks up about where it left off, like getting back on the bicycle where I last left it. I haven't found healing or, quote, enlightenment to be a one-time event where suddenly we are at one with ourselves and the world. Rather, it is a living, growing process. Somewhat like a plant continually reaching for more light in which to grow. Activism. Hermitage in nature is, for me, an inner adventure that is as equal, necessary, and as exciting as the outer one. That said, I believe that the interaction of contemplative solitude and worldly action is central to its efficacy. Profound spiritual insights and undertakings can come out of hermitage, but is really most meaningful and helpful as a practice when it is paired with action in our lives. The Cascabel Hermitage program was conceived as a retreat and refreshment for faith-based activists of whatever persuasion. Following my 2-year sojourn in the Sierra Nevada, I became a businessman determined to see what goodness could be done in the belly of the capitalist beast. And I also married and had a beautiful son. When my wildland camp in Hot Springs Canyon had been established, I not only administered the Hermitage program, but also became a conservation activist, striving to protect our wildland kin and the wildness that allows for such eremitism. Now, in my 80th year, from here in my lovely Strawbale Hermitage, I am new at this old man thing, but still striving to see in what ways I can be of service to my human and natural community. Darkness. Hermitage is not all about springtime, warmth, and being surprised by joy. As people who pursue the eremitic path know, the mutual entailment of our apparent opposites applies, and it can be as often wintry, cold, and full of sorrow. When seeking out whether my Carinthia lay in Hot Springs Canyon, I astonishingly came upon a little clearing with fresh blood and feathers everywhere, a carcass gutted. It was clear that the golden eagle had taken down the red-tailed hawk, which I'd seen earlier circling overhead. Out of my stunned person came the unconscious words, "This place is going to eat my guts out." As the passage in Ecclesiastes says, "A bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter." Counterintuitively, I knew that this was the place for me. Just so, over time, solitude in wildlands ineluctably shed all my defenses and left me vulnerable to what one retreatant aptly called the big empty. Integration. Hermitage is holistic in that it helps in the process of integrating body, feelings, and mind, and therefore becoming better able to integrate with the natural and human community as a whole. That integration helps in the process of living more in the present, but it likewise helps me see the past is not just the past, but rather lives on in the physical, emotional, and psychic DNA of our lives. Eremitic hermitage for me is ultimately about trying to find ways to expand peace and love within ourselves and with the human and natural community. Thank you.
Just to let all of you know, all of the photographs, the person who did the video, Katie Heinzel, is acting right now, living down in the canyon as the current accompaniment person. And all of the photographs that you saw of the land and the life that is upon it are all photographs that you would find, and they were all taken there. So just so you know, it is a pretty stupendous place. So when Daniel, in 2017, when Daniel could no longer accompany sojourners, I was honored to step in. So, a little background real quickly. I'm a single parent. I've been blessed to have a son and a wonderful son, daughter-in-law, and grandson. And a large part of my professional life, I'm retired. My work was spent working with marginalized people in the United States, Thailand, and Mexico. In 2014, I took early retirement to care share my parents, and when they died in 2015, I ended up in Cascabel, Arizona, by all I can say is by grace. Basically, it just happened. And I ended up with the little finances I have building an earthen structure down in the Hot Springs Canyon and hope to participate in the Hermitage program. So, what is Hermitage as a spiritual practice? The whole 9-year journey was a journey of grace and healing and challenge. I had never I've lived rurally, I worked rurally, but I'd never lived in the high desert of Arizona. I never had neighbors, roadrunners, Sonoran snakes and coach whips and coyotes and bears and coati, plenty of life under the ground, as well as the individuality of unique neighbors in an extremely rural place. So it was a huge learning curve, to say the least. And sometimes not only day to day, but we all know how it can be moment to moment where you have to draw deep. And where I lived was almost a place of vulnerability, because when you look out, it's a total expanse of sky and mountains. It's not tucked in like tall trees in New York. So it's sort of the whole cosmic thing added to this feeling of vulnerability of place as a two-legged human being. But it was also a time of deep healing and searching and longing. And Hermitage for me as a spiritual practice is not so much about a place, but about an orientation. I don't feel it matters where you are. The desert where I lived is not, natural world is not particularly silent at all, in the sense when we think silence. But it's a place where you can encounter the divine, and that encounter happens in the light, in the dark, in the heat, in the cold, in all of the life that surrounds you, and even non-life that surrounds you. However, why I felt so drawn to the Hermitage program is throughout my work life, especially outside the United States, I have had access to retreat sojourn time in natural settings and alone, and affordable on a NGO salary. And from its beginnings, the Hermitage program has always been by donation, so it serves anyone who needs it, and that was really close to my heart. So my 9 years were really also graced by knowing that I was accompanying people in the 2 hermitages we have down there, that there was a connection. And not only was I accompanying them, but they were accompanying me, which breaks the concept when we sometimes sense a darkness, or that we are alone. And number one, we are not alone. We are connected. We're just not aware of it. And definitely in a natural setting, with the wild environment, I'm connected to all of the breathing things there and non-breathing things. So, but I feel that while it's an orientation, it's also necessary to provide a place where people for the first time or needing a deeper time can go, because I think that can stimulate the big question that especially young people, young meaning in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s, would always ask when they come out. It was just a constant question, is not that their experience was this high, but that their experience was very deep. And how do they maintain that in a city, in their work lives that are crazy, in the high-tech world? I don't have an answer for that, except that having an experience of solitude and hermitage can be the training ground for getting in touch with that deepest divine part that we are all part of. So I'm ever grateful. I currently, and we'll take questions after this, because I think that's about all I have to say, but a year ago, in 2025, or probably the end of 24, it became clear that two things, that I'm getting older and the physicality of life and where I was living will have a natural end. And two, how can we continue this Hermitage program that has this long history? Before it was Daniel living down there, and then I as an individual lived down there, and it seemed that the model needed to somewhat change. So, and Maddie will put up a photograph to give you a sense. So what we did is we fundraised, and we felt that if where I lived was a place where people could temporarily come for at least 3 months of the year, of maybe the 9 months that we offer hermitages, that if they had a place to stay that was within walking distance, it's a bit of a walk, but to the hermitages, and that can serve as accompaniment person, the program would be richer also for the input of new ideas and new people, and expanding, and the opportunity to constantly nurture and share the concept there, that there's a place to meet the need, especially today where people need to step away and take time. There's no internet service, there are no electric lines, no anything out there. So the committee did fundraising, and I sold the property is sold to the Cascabel Conservation Association. The Hermitage program manages the earthen dome, and we'll put up a link. And we are inviting. We've already had 2 people. Maddie is one, and Katie is the other, who will serve until May. Come and spend some time and accompany people. So I currently, well, I'm in the US right now, but I currently will live in Ecuador with my family. And my hope is to be able to come once a year to Cascabel and continue to serve. I still serve on the Hermitage Committee from afar, but the richness of being able to accompany people on their sojourn is really special. So Maddie will end with a reflection, and then we'll have questions. Thank you.
Yes. So for this one, I have a poem actually that was written by one of our young adult volunteers. It's a group that comes out periodically, and this was written in 2022. But it kind of emphasizes their view, I think, of the nature that they experienced while they were out here. So we'll give the poem, and then I will have another 30 seconds of silence, and then just for us to let all of it sink in, and then we'll take questions. So I'll put those up. I'll put up the slide and all of that. So, anyways, the poem goes like this: A Symphony of Rests. I sit on a rock, one of many. This happens to be the most flat, though there are many potential suitors. The sun is warm against my skin, a stark contrast to the freeing temperatures that night will bring. I sit surrounded by mountains, so bare, others dressed in white, the sight of which echoes the sheer vastness of this desert. Saguaros and Palo Verdes stand tall, while their pointy friends teach mindfulness of step. Silence is their song, a symphony of rest, one that drums on the ears with such strength as if to welcome your soul to stillness, a fanfare of absence that leads the way to presence. I let go of all but the here and now. Each breath brings energy, a feeling of butterflies in my stomach, floating in my feet, a column of light running from my forehead to the core of my being, simple bliss. A bee becomes interested in me, and I in it. My eyes open and my ears attune themselves to the whisper of wind, the buzzing insects, the soft wing beat of 4 ravens overhead. I stand and stretch, feeling the cold sand between my toes. These moments of silence are short-lived, but often hard to find. But the lessons they teach reveal a stillness that is ever present within us, a stillness that connects us to something greater. Okay, thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, yes, let's let that sink in, and we can definitely, if people have questions, we can field the questions. But I just want to thank both of you for this, and Daniel as well. The video was really an excellent exploration, visual and audio exploration of his time as the Hermitage lead. That was pretty cool. I hadn't heard of Jim Corbett before I heard of the Hermitage. Like I saw a photographer on Instagram post about it. So I was like, oh, when I go to Arizona for Christmas, I'm gonna go down there and try this out. And so the one year I drove to Arizona from British Columbia, I was like, okay, this is the year. So I reserved and I stayed there a few days, and I saw this book on the shelf called Goat Walking, and I was immediately intrigued, right? So Jim Corbett, this fascinating character. His writing is poetic theology, and he's a pastoral, or he was a pastoral nomad, and he would take goats out into the wild and later cattle out into the wild and just sort of subsist with groups of people. And then he got involved with um, assisting refugees into the U.S., crossing the border, crossing through wildlands with them. the sanctuary movement. He was a co-founder of the sanctuary movement. And so I was just entranced for like 2 days by this book. And his reading of Old Testament theology and pastoral nomadism is a kind of act of rebellion. So the connection between Corbett and the Hermitage is very strong. And I could see Father Charles Brandt and Jim Corbett kind of dialoguing in my mind over these things. So it was very, very cool, the connection. And I think when I reached out about this, I emailed Susan and said, we're a sister organization. And you're like, well, I don't know about sister organization. I've never heard of you. So we're like trying to do, like trying to build this bridge. And I think it's going to be a real natural fit to be connected. But yeah, are there any thoughts, questions? Bruce. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Bruce here. I apologize. I was late. I was having trouble. But on Jim Corbett, maybe you mentioned it at the beginning. Um, so I was aware of him through the magazine Sojourners in the 80s as quite a light with the wars in Latin America and helping the refugees and so forth, light in the wilderness there. But how was it that then, maybe you mentioned it, that the land that you're on now, the conservation area, he donated it? Is that correct? So maybe you mentioned it, because there's a parallel to what Charles has done with the society, the Hermitage Society. He donated it to be a park, but also has left the Hermitage to the society, and very similar, like Jason has said, to what you're doing, except in the forest, not the desert. So was it donated? Is that correct? Either Susan or
Bruce, it was Daniel Baker who donated the land that he had bought and lived down there. Jim Corbett would have not had those kinds of funds. He lived in Cascabel with after the trials, which you have alluded to in the sanctuary movement and the trials that were held, and he was acquitted and moved to Cascabel and slowly began to move conceptually into not only sanctuary for people, but sanctuary for the land and land rights. And then with some other people there, and including those, and he had written Goat Walking, and then he began Sanctuary for All Life. So yeah, it was not Jim's land. It was Daniel Baker donated all of that. So and Daniel always refers to himself as the administrator, but he was the huge moving force for the entire project all through these years. So I just have to say that. That's my opinion. Okay. But it is based on Jim Corbett's life and work. We have a sister organization, which Maddie can speak to, Saguaro Juniper, that still exists, Quaker-based, and as sister organizations, we have a covenant with them on the land, and we share parcels of the land with Saguaro Juniper, and the covenant has to do with land, respect for the land and land rights. So, yeah.
Jim was kind of a pioneering thinker in deep ecology too. So a bit like the connection between Charles Brandt and Thomas Berry. Jim Corbett was thinking along the lines of Thomas Berry in the 1980s. He said he wanted to live sabbatically, right? This sort of sabbatical, letting the land rest, and to live in ecological harmony with the land, with a community of people, as a part of the ecosystem, which is very hard to do in the desert, which is why he looked to pastoralism as an approach for food systems, which was controversial because environmentalists typically, in the West especially, denigrate the cow as a kind of a pariah to conservation. So he had some very strange and interesting ideas at the time that have sort of been synthesized, and but it's a kind of a rereading of the Old Testament theology of land as a deep ecological ethic. How many acres is involved in the whole complex, Susan?
Oh, geez, Maddie, can you answer that? So if you,
Yeah,
yeah,
actually, I do know.
okay.
For the Hermitage area only, I think is around like 400 acres, something like that. There's a good amount of area there, but then all around, I think Jim kind of started that spark, and a whole bunch of community members came together to both like fundraise and just like acquire different pieces of land over the decades. And now we're at around almost like 10,000 acres. And a lot of it is state land grazing lease. So it's like not, I guess, not totally owned, but we have a bunch of deeded lands within there that the organization like Saguaro Juniper, that Jim had started, that Susan had mentioned, they do own like pieces of land in there. So if anybody wanted the grazing lease, it would be kind of broken up. So that's kind of, it helps to protect it like overall. So yeah.
We have a question in the chat from Willa, who's a board member with us, and knew Charles as one of the most important figures in the Hermitage Society. She asked, "What does an accompany person do besides be there?" That's her question in the chat.
So, and Maddie can give her take. In general, we at the beginning, I came up with that word. It comes from the Spanish acompañamiento, which is a person, definitely during all of the Nicaraguan war, during, all of the 80s, all of that. And these were people who accompanied the poor, meaning you walk along beside. It is not a therapist. It is not a checker or whatever. So we created that word because the role is we communicate with people when they want to have a sojourn and their needs, and make sure that this is what they want to do. We pick them up. They don't drive in. We pick them up, as you know, Jason, in a spot, parking spot. We drive them in. We give them an orientation, and and don't see them again till we pick them up. But each day, the accompaniment person checks a signal board that they change, because we have to know that they're safe down there, that they haven't wandered off in 10,000 acres, and, can find them and bring them back. And a lot of it for me, and Maddie can give her own take, for me, it's taking cues from the person. So for example, people can come totally burdened and they just, they're not going to talk, and that needs to be respected. Or they want to talk a lot, or they ask questions. So my thing was always the focus needs to be on the person. So even when we pick them up, it's not like, well, how did it go or what? It's more like just waiting and see what they want to share and nurture them. So that's it. And you want to add anything, Maddie?
Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, it's just helping take them because it's so remote, like the area that we go down to. It's like you can hike down into it, but if you have a lot of things like for your stay, because you have to be able to sustain yourself for your stay, it's not really like feasible for somebody to get everything down there. So part of it is really just like physically like making it possible to get out into this area that's like very remote, and so that people can go be in that part of nature. by themselves. And then also, yeah, like Susan was saying too, just checking on them and making sure that they're okay every day, because a lot of people come from places where they're not used to being out in nature so much. And so that experience is like both, it can be like really terrifying, and maybe they don't want to stay as long as they had originally thought. And then also it can just, anything can happen. So it's good just to have somebody there for peace of mind, you know, like it's super rare that anything actually ever has happened, I think, but just to like make sure that people feel like safe, so that they can have the experience that they're looking to have, rather than actually being terrified the whole time. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big part of it. Yeah, it's just, yeah, kind of ensuring that. And yeah, I feel like I kind of described it the other day too. It's almost just being like a guide down into the space too. So part of it is that you live down there, and so you know the area, you know, like you've been living in the space. So you can kind of like orient people to the area as they come down and like introduce them. I think that's a big part of Susan's idea, maybe with the accompaniment thing. Right.
All right. Any more questions, thoughts? Kathy's got a
Thanks.
question.
It sounds I used to go to the Desert House of Prayer just on the other side of Tucson and loved being in that on that land. So I'm kind of intrigued. I'd probably love to come and visit sometime and do a sojourn. I'm just curious about I think you just have two spaces for people to stay. You can describe that a little bit more, but also curious about who you're finding coming in these years that we're living in, which are so challenging. If it's a bit like our Hermitage at on Bowen here, where we get a lot of young people. I'm just so those two questions would be helpful. Thank you, and I've really appreciated hearing about Casabel.
It's so good to see you on here, Kathy. I'll answer and then Maddie can add on. I used to go to the Desert House of Prayer myself before I even knew Cascabel. It no longer exists. I don't know if you know that. It's got bought out and everything's built up around it. So it's very sad that they're going away. Over the years, more now recent, so for example, when I started in 2017, there were a lot of repeat people, not a lot of people in their 20s, people in their 40s or 50s, and people who have returning people. And then occasionally new people, because we don't advertise. It's word of mouth kind of thing. COVID was nuts. Young nurses, people out in the field, they needed something different. And most of them not people who had been camping or hiking or whatever, or doing any of that. The last couple of years, I would say from COVID on, they started getting younger and younger. And one of the main reasons that they would write in their reflections or tell me later why, or in their application, because they fill out an application form before, so we can get to know them. Because of the cell phone addiction, there's no cell phone coverage. You don't have coverage. And the need to like, what is it like to live? Because they've only grown up with it. So I saw a lot younger, but in general, the ages go across the board. I mean, young is not like 21, but I would say mid-20s, early 30s. And Maddie, for you in the last year?
It's been a little bit slower in the past year, but yeah, I think everybody who's come has been, yeah, younger, like you've been saying, Susan, yeah, 20s or 30s. But you also asked about the the sites that we have too, the two places that you can stay. And yeah, like Susan mentioned, there's no cell coverage out there, and we actually also don't have any power to either of the locations. So it's like electricity free also. So you're like totally off grid. And there's like water storage tanks like to have the water. So there's not even like a well or anything out there. You just like go and yeah, we bring water in and everything. Yeah, which also is I think a whole part of the thing too of accompanying people is just like yeah bringing the water in and stuff for them before their sojourn starts. But we have one called the cottage. We call it the cottage hermitage, and it's basically like a little wooden cabin. And that one also has a little group campground area with the ramada, so there's like some shaded areas. Yeah, and like a big fence kind of around the whole area, because there is rangeland around there for the cows, the aforementioned cows that Jim Corbett had started for saguaro juniper. They do go around that land as well. So we have a fence there just to keep them out from the site itself and the cabin that's there. And then the other hermitage site, we call it the caravan because it's like supposed to be mobile, so it can go in and out. But it's more of like a metal kind of a cabin. It's also like a cabin too, but it's like a metal one. So yeah, it's just a different kind of a structure, and it's up in a different part of the canyon too. So yeah, they're both isolated off from where you can't see like any of the other living spaces in the canyon or like anything around there as well. So you're just like off on your own place. But they do shift. I mean, right now those are the sites that we have, but it could change like in future because I think the caravan we just started, what was it like 3 or 4 years ago? It's newer. And then the cottage hermitage we've had around since I forget 2010, 20 somewhere between 2010. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, they have changed over the years, and some of the reflections that I read earlier, like the earlier ones were in, we called it a straw bale hermitage. So it was like a little house built out of straw bales and then like clay over it. And that was in a different area completely. So yeah, so over time they could change, but those are the two that we have right now.
And the whole program shut down for the hottest part of the year, is that right? Is it 3 months or 4 months?
In general, what we've done in the past is take a break in June because it is the worst month. It's not monsoon time. And the July is monsoon time, August and September, but very rarely do you have anybody come. One of the rule is that you have to be an Arizona person to understand what monsoon means because it can be rough. Second of all, the Hot Springs Canyon can run in monsoon time from the water coming from the mountains too, and you have to be flexible in your schedule because you won't be able to cross the wash back, which has happened in the past. So in general, it's really, really difficult because there's no cooling systems, none of that. So in general, the months are more like mid-September through May that we're pretty busy, or that we have the hermitages are there. Yeah.
Right. Robert's got a question.
Yeah, I guess I've looked at a number of places, or I've done a number of retreats. Probably the most remote would be a 3-day vision quest in sort of the desert areas of Washington. What I found, well, some of the questions were answered in that you mentioned you had a water supply. What about cooking? And I understand that I did hear that you drove the supplies down because I was quite surprised in my first experience in desert country. It took about 30 pounds of water to stay for 3 or 4 days. It was a big deal just to get water into a remote site. So I'm just curious about some of the physical logistics. And this is sort of a biblical metaphor, but it's almost like the Mary Martha story. Mary is the person out in the wilderness, but there's got to be a Martha around someplace to do the day-to-day logistics. I mean, at least getting water and things like that. So if you could just flesh in that, maybe it's my practical bent where, I've done enough camping to know the stuff is important.
No, they're very good questions, Robert. And actually, on our website, you can see pictures, which will really help. But in general, we have water catchment off of both of the hermitages, and one has in the the Cottage Hermitage, which is also has a campground. There's a 500-gallon water catchment tank. And then in the campground, there's 800, and that tank got donated, which is why we built the Ramada, because there is water, it's just not under the ground. In the Caravan Hermitage, which is actually a gypsy wagon, it's a beautiful little structure, that has two 500-gallon water tanks. So, and that's not drinking water. We bring in 5-gallon in our trucks when people come. We bring 5-gallon containers of drinking water from where I used to live. That's Hot Springs Canyon water you can drink. We also have a Berkey filtration system at one of the hermitages. So to get people used to, you can filter your water, and it's really, from all of that. But so that's how we do water. But no, there's no refrigeration. We provide all of the cooking things and the propane stove and the dishes. It's a simple setup for one person, but everybody has what they need. During COVID, we changed the policy from having sheets and blankets and all that too, because of COVID, that they had to bring their sleeping bag, and that actually worked out really great because we are an hour away from the closest town, which is Benson, and to do laundry in like a turnover is you have to go into town to wash clothes if you want to do it in a machine. I was off grid, so I didn't have that capacity. But people bringing their sleeping bags, but what they do bring, and it lists it on our website, but they bring their food. And for the Caravan Hermitage, they have to be healthy enough. It's more remote. We particularly wanted it that way for a person who you have to be able to hike in with your stuff. I'll drive in the water, but you have to carry your stuff because 100 pounds of books, that's great, but you're going to have to carry it. So it's a different experience for someone a little bit more. But we drive in with people's groceries and all of that, and they learn how to live if they're staying. And people stay anywhere from 3 days. The average is usually a week. And the longest they can stay is a month, and we've had people do a month-long retreat. And so most of their food stuffs are, dehydrated stuff or canned or, fruits and, root vegetables, stuff like that. So, and it works out well.
What about psychological support? I mean, if you have somebody who has wants to have the experience, but doesn't have a lot of camping and being on their own experience. And frankly, I mean, they could freak out with the silence. I mean, that would be a concern of organizer kind of people. How do you handle that if somebody wants support or is desperate and needs support?
Well, there's two things. One is we have an application they fill out, and it's very clear on there that you need to be of sound mind and body as much as you can. And we have to trust that because there's no way to check that. But if somebody can't do it, which in my tenure, my 9 years, it only happened once, that they just couldn't after a day. It was too much for them. And so we have the signal systems that we send up. They leave a message, go down and pick them up, because we don't have the capacity to have therapists or whatever to do that. And people feel secure knowing that there is once a day someone looking out for them. The other thing is if they can walk, they could walk to, I always make it clear to where that Dome Hermitage is. That's where the accompaniment person lives. That's where I live. They could walk there and the door's always open. And if for some reason I wasn't there, they'd have they could leave a message. But we give people scenarios. But it's not, it's a very rare, interesting, people seem to work through it, interestingly enough. They'll work through their things from their reflections. That's the only way we know. So that's kind of what we have in place. Yeah.
Okay.
Moved once a
Well,
day so that the guides knew what was going on, and or at least that you were okay at least once a day.
Exactly. That's made very clear. So yeah, I mean, if you have health problems or it's not a healthy thing to be doing that kind of a thing. You need something different. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your practical answers. It's just having it, I've done enough of it to know that, oh, things could go south. So thank you.
all right. Well, oh, Robert, one more thought, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, and I've also experienced the anxiety of, oh, what do I do if things go south, or that kind of thing, or how am I handling things? Because it's only natural that kind of feeling is going to come up. Oh, I'm really alone, or am I unsafe? I guess would be the core concern. So thank you for your answer.
And the stars are amazing. Ravens by day and stars by night. All right. Well, that might be a good time to let this wrap up and disperse to our various hermitage practices. But what's the website for the CCA? I've linked
I will
the
put it in the
Charles
chat.
Brandt in the chat as well. charlesbrandt.ca if you want to get involved with our board or volunteer or attend an in-person meditation, or if you have ideas for webinars, we'd love to hear them. There's that in the chat, cascabelconservation.org. Check out Jim Corbett's book. There's a podcast called Future Ecologies that did a 4-episode series on Jim Corbett, and you can hear his voice in it, and it's really powerful and beautiful. But Sanctuary for All Life is a profound book, and the second edition of Goat Walking also is very interesting.
And Maddie's going to put a link for you or anyone to share with people that you might know if someone has an interest in spending some couple of months with us down there as accompaniment person. It's called Invitation for Expression of Interest, and she'll put a link to that. And by the way, that podcast is fantastic. The person who did it, Adam, he was down at the Corbett Center and trying to sleep outside like Jim did, and he's from Canada. So when the javelinas came through, he hightailed it inside. It's a great podcast. So I would put that up there if people really want to understand a complex person. Yeah.
Great. All right, folks. Well, it's good to see some of you that I know, and it's good to meet some of you that I don't. And otherwise, take good care, keep in touch, sign up for our email lists, and let me know if you have thoughts or ideas. This will be recorded and posted to YouTube, which you can watch later and share with others.